Welcome back, audience. How you been? If you're still listening to me, well, you know, you know what's up. In this video, I want to talk about this um, two concepts that are very well known, and one is uh, the devil and divine, right? Or let's use a Spanish word; it will be easier to understand. Diablo or divino. And I will talk about these two and what do they mean. Diablo, of course, it's obvious. It is what you would call double tongue. Excuse me, not double tongue, double tongue. It's a double tongue, meaning a double speak or speaking a lie. And what does that mean? That means it is a linguistic or syntax or code that leads to error. And what is error? Error is something that is a disconnect. There's no connection there. There's a disconnect. And you would relate to an error as a human being by understanding that it leads to pain or suffering. Okay? Lie or incorrect code leads to suffering. And that is pretty much a basically an illustration or denomination of the corrupt masculine. Is a code that leads to suffering, that's based on a lie. It's a big deal. And it's not just somebody saying a lie, even though that is, of course, that will lead to somebody's suffering. And I will tell you how it works. But also, any kind of law that is written or um, culturally programmed that is not based on the truth leads to suffering. Okay, so everything that you see wrong in a society stems from this uh, concept or an idea that is not correct and that leads to error. And when you have one idea that leads to error, then you need to create another idea to patch up that error. And then you see what I'm trying to say. If you've done any kind of programming, you know what I mean. Is that if by finding the root cause of the problem, all these other patching mechanisms kind of disappear. And necessity for these patching mechanisms disappear. Because the code must be elegant for it to not lead to errors. Now, you may ask the question, well, if somebody, that's just not, it's not only somebody's telling a lie. It is, I mean, you see how it functions. The entire governmental structure functions like that. And then you say, well, what can they do? The incentive is to achieve a specific goal. And if they don't be deceitful, they don't go these deceitful ways, they won't achieve that goal. And so therefore they won't be success in the matrix. Exactly. But I'm saying that being success in the matrix is not being success in life. And that leads to suffering. And but the point of it all that I'm trying to say here is that it is very, very simple. Lie leads suffering. Lie leads pain. And I'm not saying just this, colloquially spoken lie, but I mean also how the society is broken the laws of the universe and written the code that does not correspond to this. And one of the biggest ones that I keep on trying to communicate, and even though I'm still on a platform that is like you would consider a social platform that is owned by the corporation, in a way I'm still um, sort of like not living my own protocol fully, but that's by the plan, because I'm also moving on to Web 3.0 platforms. But the idea is that communicating on both of these platforms creates the bridge, and so that's why you can see people who are still subject to the matrix, which is my videos are subject to the matrix, which is corporations, yet doing the best they can to communicate the message, um, to leave it, to create a different one, where that law, that universal law, is not broken. And in this case, what's been broken is this idea that a corporation, which is like I said before, it's a type of ego, because it has only a a specific purpose in mind. It doesn't, because it's just bunch of code. It's like, okay, we got to need to make money, right? That's the only thing that they have in mind. All corporations, no matter how good they say, oh, we care about our customers. Thank you for choosing blah blah blah. You know, it's all just programming. Of course, all they care is the profit, and the only reason they would not go for 100% to the profit if there's a law that prevents them and makes them very difficult to go just for the profit. Okay, and that's the corporation. But the thing is that the corporation's been allowed to control and sell information. That is the broken law. The first country that they're going to say no corporation can be in charge of information, because this is the same thing when the ego is, instead of being in charge of tangible things, is now is engaging in managing your internal thought processes and psyche. That corporation, that ego, is not built because it has like very robotic nature. It's an operating system that corresponds just purely to robotic. Okay, what's the outcome? That's what we need to get. Bow. And there's no consideration for anything else. That's the outcome that we need to get. Okay, and it creates suffering if it's in charge of information. Okay, and of course we can go into what is information. Anybody who imagines the reality, even like through the point of suffering, will create that reality that leads to more suffering, because the ego was in charge of the information in that moment. You see, there's that first law of consciousness that cannot be broken. And like I said, if any country would decide that this is indeed the policy that we ought to be living by, and would make all the corporations producing tangible goods but not in charge of software, you see, that's Web 3.0 as is what we're trying to do. And I hope that countries will embrace Web 3.0 and will eliminate these software corporations, because you don't need them. You don't need software corporations, especially right now when the code can be written by the AI and shared by everybody, and the application could be managed in a decentralized manner. That's already been proven to be the case. It's very easy to see that you can have something like Uber that is not run by the corporation, because it's just connecting people to people in a protocolized manner. And that's the point, and that's what Web 3.0 is all about. It is collectively agreed protocol upon which we are going to interact with each other. You don't need a corporation there taking money for it. You see, you don't need a corporation. They're taking money for it. And of course, as you know, controlling it and doing all sorts of things. So it's a big, big, big deal. Sorry to go off the topic a little bit, but I just wanted to say that one of the biggest corruptions that you see in society and politics and countries is this. But everybody is, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people, they don't look at the root cause of everything, and then they argue between each other. "No, that's you, that's you, that's you." You see what I'm trying to say? But they don't see the root cause of suffering, and that's this corruption of the law, and that is Diablo. It's the code that is not leading to the connection and union. It's leading to separation and suffering. Now, I'm going to say something more about this, because you can say, well, wait a second, a person who is lying their way to the top um, works for that person, doesn't it? I mean, you know, a man can lie his way to, you know, cheating on his wife, can lie his way through making money in business. Um, and you can say that, wait a second, that's why are you saying that lie does not lead to like happiness or satisfaction? Because if anybody gets away with the lie, it's only temporary, because the law of nature does not permit that to be sustained. And the second thing is that the suffering has been put on a person that's believed the lie. Okay, because if you believe the lie, and which is, all beliefs are lies, because you don't need a belief to live a direct truth. That's how I define a belief. So um, if you believe a lie, then you are going to end up living some sort of suffering in your reality, because you believe the lie. And you can also say, wait a second, well, I kind of just got into this thing, got into this, I didn't even get a chance not to believe the lies, and my reality was basically programmed to me, without my consent, because I was just a child or trusting person, and then ended up leading me to the hard truth of the reality, and leading to suffering. But that moment when it leads to suffering, then it opens the door for actually you discovering the truth, and that the truth you will discover behind that suffering, behind that pain that it was caused. Okay, so and in a way, we come naive into this reality, and there's nothing you can do. You're gonna get betrayed, and you're gonna, there's not a lot you can do, unless you come into this world in a family that lives by the truth, and that's very rare. But if you do, then that's the only way you can be raised, based on reality that is real and true, and then you wouldn't have this problem of reprogramming yourself. Um, okay, now I hope I'm communicating this well enough. Lie, whether you believe a lie or whether you tell a lie, it's going to lead to suffering right back to you. And so, like I said before, you can't believe a lie once because you're naive. I mean, how can you know? But when it leads to suffering and pain, okay, That's the lie. That's where it led me. Alchemize that pain, alchemize that suffering, and you will discover the truth behind it. And what is the truth? The truth is the closest thing to love or bliss. That's the truth. And only then you can live from the truth, which is original truth. Is not a line of code. It's not the structure that we live by. Original is a state of being that is blissful. And from that state of being that is blissful, any kind of code that stems from will lead back to that bliss. And now we're getting to divino, divine. And it means basically to come together, to join. And one is leading to separation, disconnected dots, that is painful, and another one is leading to connected dots, that is blissful. One leads to suffering, another one leads to bliss. This is why I said before, this reality is either blissful or it's either suffering. You don't really have any other choice how to live this reality. Now, what does this indicate? This indicates that the line of code, the idea, stems from that infinite power. And that's why Krishnamurti was talking about the only good idea stems, or the insight stems from the infinite and not preconceived notion, not pre-recorded. It has to stem from the infinite. And that idea is going to lead, because it stems from the bliss, leads to the bliss. You see? And then again, a masculine is somebody who creates the code from divine masculine. It creates the code or structure of life from blissful state that leads to blissful state. Okay? And the feminine side is allowing that, or believing that, or not believing that. So if you are creating something from that bliss, it can be allowed by the feminine or denied by the feminine, which is, of course, in this case, your own consciousness, which then later can be represented in your 3D reality as well. Okay? And again, in the previous video I mentioned that there's this the code, divine code, that leads to organized, elegant, and blissful harmony, right? That leads to harmony, the structure that leads to harmony, and the structure that leads to pain. Now, this Diablo thing is not completely useless. It must be used on a tangible things. You see what I'm trying to say? It is a like a wherever the robotics works, whatever the if then works, that's where it needs to be used. Okay? That's why I'm saying that it has to be used on a tangible things, where it's about things, not people, because you use this pure logic and so-called the tree of knowledge, where you use that to learn a skill or to achieve a specific goal, right? There, you use that faculty of so-called Diablo where it's necessary. And to give you an example, maybe um, well, to resolve a problem, right, or to a let's say you're building something, you're building a machinery, right? Over there, everything has to be corresponding to logic because you're dealing with things and they correspond to physics. And so you apply that there. This is why I say, like, dealing with tangible goods and things, that's where you use it. Okay? Uh, but you don't use it on a psyche because then becomes a double speak, so to speak, or a lie. Because look what happens. You can say, wait a second, the incentive was to make a profit, wasn't it? And so we were successful at it. Right. That is correct. And on the way there, you had to lie, you had to be, clever and all these other things. And but, in the end, you made a profit and you created a lot of suffering. So it wasn't really profitable anyway, because that suffering is going to be experienced by the people who induced that suffering whenever people are no longer believing their lies. And so their ways of producing suffering is going to be reflected back onto them. It's a feedback that it's just basically this reality is a closed system that um, gives you direct feedback. Now, it may be delayed feedback and you got away with it for some time, but you didn't really get away with it at all because every single pleasure that you received at the cost of somebody else's suffering, guess what? Now you got to fucking take it. Now you got to deal with it. And good luck. And that's why, when someone's bullshitting you or whatever and saying, and say, bullshit. Nope. Just nope. Let them deal with their own lies. Build a strong boundary between the web of lies and harmony, what you want to cultivate in your own life. And you will need to have structure in your life, and you will need to enforce that structure, and you need to have a certain type of order to run your life. But if that order is stemming from the original truth, if you've imagined that idea or it came to you that idea from the state of bliss, then that's where it's going to be leading whoever is engaging on that ride that you've built, so to speak. Okay? So, that's my message for today. Okay? It's just misappropriation of those capacities. You can say there's this divine matrix, which is like the infinite that writes an elegant code, and then you have that rigid lower mind or devil matrix that is not writing the elegant code. It's writing very rigid and logical. If then, it doesn't have anything else. It's if then. Give me the goal and I'll find a way how to get there. It doesn't consider anything else. So you that needs to be used on the tangible goods, and you'll if because intangible goods or things, it's very clearly. If you run the current this way, what the machine is doing. Is it doing this or is it doing that? And the machinery, it's has to be used like that. Okay. But you cannot use the the systematic excuse me, operating system of the machinery onto the psyche. So in a way, I'm distinguishing that there is an operating system of consciousness or your psyche, and there is an operating system of your body or things. It's where it's supposed to be used. But when there's a misappropriation of that operating system and put in on the controlling the information, not matter, that's when that first error happens. Because it's gonna be, so to speak, like double speaking and creating lots of errors, because it just cannot handle um, the elegance that is required for that code that leads to that state, right? And in a way, if you put everything in the right place, you'll find that everything works perfectly. And it's not about eliminating, it is just putting in the right place. For example, right now you have these non-player characters that are very intellectual and very smart in that regard, but they have no intelligence. They have no connection to the intelligence. So you have these intellectual people creating tools and judging that intellect as being intelligent, and it's not intelligent at all. Why am I saying this? Is because they're supposed to be producing technology and tangible goods. They're not supposed to be uh, uh, getting involved in how society is supposed to be working, right? And then you may say, well, then who does create that code? Who does create that code, and who does enforce that code? In my suggestion is that you either have a city or a town run by the corporations or run by the king or pharaoh or a actual person or a group of people like a council. But then again, it's there's a risk of going into the corporation again. But usually what happens is that it has to be like the lots of villages, with each village who has a king who runs that village is the best um, model of consciousness, but not this medieval kind of king. No, it's not like that. It's not king because it has lots of power over, you know, uh, law and whatnot. It's actually somebody who's capable of producing that organizing energy and producing these ideas that leads to elegance and enforcing them. You see, like what I'm trying to say, at the core of the civilization, there has to be a pharaoh or a king, the real pharaoh, real king. That's what was going on the last time they had civilizations that were overall sort of harmonic and leading to a sustainable way of life, right? It was run by these people, by these kings. And these kings were not like these medieval kings. They were real kings. meaning they had a spiritual authority, meaning they had a capacity to take the energy that is dividing and to unite that. Basically, they were very powerful alchemists, and that's how they were able to run a civilization. It's because of their uh, effect on the civilization, their energy, if you will. Now, this is not really talked about as like, well, there's a society is just like a bunch of code. No, society is not just a bunch of code. It has to have a person in the center who is obviously writing that code in an elegant way and knowing when that code needs to be, you know, enforced, and knowing when how to deal with that specific situation, and is dealt with on an energy level first, and then on the tangible level second. And that's why, like in this so-called matrix society, elders have no purpose. Like, but in this society that I'm talking about, holistic society, an elder has a huge purpose because the elder may not be as mobile as somebody young, but has a huge energetic power over the reality. And so, in my model of these of the society, you have to have at the center. I know that people like uh, are not trusting right now with like this. Oh, but it's gonna be a dictator again and stuff like that. If the person is a dictator, then it's gonna be a dictator. But if the person is the real deal, then it's not going to be a dictator. But somebody has to be uh, enforcer and creator of the structure that leads to harmony. This is what I'm trying to say. Like this idea that like all masculine or is bad, or all you know, authority is bad. It's not true. You can't say that. Like I said in this example, there is this Diablo masculine structure that's writing the code that is not sustainable, and then there's Divino masculine structure that's writing the code that is sustainable. You listen to the tyrannical father, you're gonna get your ass handed to you. But if you listen to benevolent father, it's gonna lead to enjoyment of life. But whatever way you look at it, somebody has to be in charge, and so you have to get used to the idea that um, the best way of having a society is run by somebody like this, maybe even a couple that runs the entire village, and then another couple runs another village and stuff like that. And so they're capable of running because they're capable of creating the structure of society that is harmonious. Okay, and you don't scale it, and you don't make it that uh, you know, the king of the village. You don't place it and make it in the king of the world. That's the mistake. You leave everybody at their own jurisdiction, and you make nobody in charge of the world, because that's the principle of decentralization. Because if each king is in charge of their own village, um, they are contributing to the overall harmony, and each village can have these types of people, and they contributing to their own harmony. But they have to be real deal. They cannot be this false light nonsense where they have not done no alchemy and they're still using all sorts of tricks and appear that they are such a good couple, but they're just actually dark couple. You know, I'm just saying this because there has to be a discernment. You can't let these people to get away with that shit anymore. You can't afford to have somebody who's a tyrant running your village. Of course not. You can't. And you have to have enough discernment to know who's who. But that's the structure that I can see happening in nature, and that's the structure that can run the societies in a healthy way. And I'm not eliminating the necessity of the matrix code, which is very useful to producing technology, and it's also very useful running the military. And you will say, well, if the world is so harmonious, why do you need the military? You do need the military to protect that harmony from another occurrence of the Diablo structure imposing their societal will. You have to have military for that, because you live in a time where the natural tendency of reality is a 50-50, 50 darkness, 50 light. So in this epoch, in this era, you need military. You need to defend the boundary of your order. You have to do this. Um, and because Diablo learns by feedback. If they go directly to the goal, they don't care about any other value but the outcome of the tangible thing, the number on the screen, the the status, whatever it's a thing that you can see on the screen. That's what they want, right? That's the code. It just wants to drive to that point. And so if you incentivize and you allow them or that code to accomplish that goal, then it's just going to be, it's like a machine, right? But if you make it so it's not profitable to go that way, it's not going to go that way. And that's where the military and that's where the defense is necessary, to give the feedback to the system, because it's not alive, it's a machine. You give that the feedback to the system, basically go fuck yourself. You're not going to get profit through this way. And so if you shut tight, they'll get no profit. They will start looking for other ways of how to express. And they have to go towards getting the profit through producing tangible goods, and maybe even being part of, military, right? Because, man, military is going to be run by the bots, or in the military, it's what is mostly wanted: a person who obeys orders. That's what is wanted. And basically, the more of a robotic that person is, the better is the soldier, right? The less emotions they have, the more logic, more it's just the better the soldier. And so, as you can see there, it's not a lot of space for the person with the soul. I don't know, but there might be a military orders that do not have a blind, order obedience and stuff like that. Okay, I don't want to go in this because I don't really know enough about the subject, but I can tell that military is necessary. This is why, like, this world, the best chance that this world has to create a structure of the protectorates, holistic society on a small scale, where the interest is enjoyment of life. I mean, really, like, what the fuck do the people want? And if there is this a capacity to enjoy life and have an experience of growing as a person, expressing yourself, doing all sorts of things, then it's a society is running well. But on a bigger scale, you need to protect that society. And it has to be protected, but not the government. This is why there's no overarching government, but there's a protectorate. And there's local governments only. And these governments are not corporations, are people. And this is why I'm saying that they have to be like kings and queens that run the village. The kings and queens of the villages on the entire world like that, because they have their own village to run, and they don't have jurisdiction outside their village. And if they fuck it up, people gonna leave their village, go to another village where the order is working better, and they're gonna have immediate feedback, and they're gonna have to make changes so that can work for them. And people are gonna be moving to the villages that has the highest level of harmony and order, and not staying with the people who are false light. Naturally, right? I mean, you heard about these communities where run by some guru and end up in a disaster because that guru was just a not not tethered to the source himself, not tethered to the truth. So it was all built on bullshit, and so it ends with a disaster. But the village can be run by somebody who's not a fucking guru, but just a good person who's preferably an alchemist, so he knows how to access the source of, or also of truth, and knows how to run the village. That's it. Um, that's pretty much it. And then, of course, each household has to have their own authority, which is, of course, the man and the woman has to have run their household, and then there has to be somebody running the entire village. There is the structure, but it's only used at the local level, not on the global. Because on a global level, then you see what I'm trying to say. Even the president is really subject to a lot of laws that are being written, and now get caught in all sorts of corporate games, and not really seeing that the idea is to shut down all non-hardware corporate structures. And that's the way to resolve this problem. I really hope that people are going to do this in the countries like, where they made Bitcoin a national currency, El Salvador, so they say. That may be a good candidate for these laws that are, Web 3.0 friendly, and so on and so on. Some countries will begin doing this, and they will show an example. And these countries, hopefully, they're going to become protectorate, and they're the ones who are going to govern and protect the holistic structure of the society, and have military power to protect it through the physical possibility of invasion. So it's not, without consequences that if somebody can, physically invade. You see? Life is code. And like I said, it's not that there's no use for this type of getting to the point of goal, and the goal being the only purpose that is necessary to accomplish. It's not a problem on the on the tangible things, right? You see, you can kind of because if you make an error there, if you build something and you made an error, you're gonna get the feedback and you can correct it, and everything is kind of fine. But when you impose this structure on the society, and then the feedback is pain, and then you come up with another way of reducing pain and prescribing pills and drugs and stuff like that, and so you see how you have like that really dysfunctional society. And look, you can even see on people, there's this freaking emptiness in the eyes. They may be popular, they may be celebrities, but there's no life in there. It's all programmed act. And so you see that a lot of people like that, and you look at them and you're like, they're acting, but there's no aliveness there. And it's not a good thing. I mean, it's sort of like the suffering being ignored because there's some drugs that are being used or whatever, and there's this appearance of a person that is, having a good time, or but there's no one there. Anyway, that's enough for today. Diablo happens only when you apply the operating system. Okay, I guess it's time to shut the fuck up. All right, see you in the next one. Peace.